A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I greet you, my brothers and sisters, with a noble and universal greeting, the greeting of peace used by the prophets and messengers of our universal Creator, Almighty Allah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is the 6th day of January 2023, and we have the opportunity to look forward to a new year. And as we go forward looking towards the new year and intending for ourselves in terms of our priorities, we can look at the year gone by and we can be grateful. We can be grateful. It's always wonderful to stop and reflect and to look back, to assess, to evaluate, and to acknowledge, to appreciate, and to look forward, and look forward with intent, with a renewed focus and commitment. And so I like to say, shukr to Allah that we have had the opportunity every Friday for the last year gone by, 2021, to have done Friday lectures. I've been alive and well and healthy, and have done every one of the Friday lectures for the year 2022 and also for the year 2021. Even through the lockdown, we continued with our Friday lectures. I'm very grateful for that. And in 2020, I did every Friday lecture. Before the lockdown, I did it in mosques. During the lockdown, when we had our private Jumu'ahs, I did it there. And during the lockdown, we did our Friday lectures online. And so I'm very grateful for 2022 and the opportunity we had to congregate every Friday, and the year before that, and the year before that, and the many years before that. Some of you may or may not know that it was in the year 2012 when I was invited to give my first Jumu'ah pre-Khutbah lecture. And I took that opportunity, and I haven't looked back ever since. And since that first time in 2012, I have spoken now over 250, between 250 to 300 Friday lectures, both in mosques around South Africa, some of the biggest mosques in Durban, Johannesburg, Cape Town, other places around, including George and so on and so forth in South Africa. I've had this privilege, and for that I'm very grateful. The beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if you want to learn about something, then teach it. Whatever you know, teach, share it with people. Education is a very important part of the Islamic tradition. And I want to remind you that when the Prophet ﷺ fought defensive wars, when people felt threatened by him and his, moving into a different way from the way that was followed at that time, people around him, including his own family, were threatened because of the political shift that was taking place, and they tried to assassinate him, and were bothered by the development of this community and what they stood for. And in the defensive wars that he focused on and protected him and this teaching of Islam and truth, when they took prisoners, he said to those prisoners who knew how to read and write, he said, if you teach 10 people to read and write, you can be set free. There was humanity, he fed them, and a lot of people, just actually the prisoners of war that were in his custody, they accepted Islam because of the way that they were treated while they were prisoners of war, and while they were in the service of the others, the way they were treated, was completely, they were treated better as prisoners by the Prophet than they were treated by their leaders. And he gave them their freedom to return to their communities, and that they teach people to learn to read and write. So reading and writing, education is very important in Islamic teaching, and we've had that opportunity to congregate now, as I said, from 2012 and through the years, especially the last few years. Every Friday, I've had even when I was away in Portugal and Turkey, I was able to connect and do these lectures. I'm very grateful for that, especially for the development of my iman, my faith. I'm not the same person that I started off. I remember speaking at the first Friday lecture on the importance of salam, peace in Islam. Peace, the importance of being at peace, and the value of peace, and that's where I started. And now, over the years, I've developed the 7 spiritual practices for empowered Muslims, and we've been speaking at a level of depth that, personally I haven't come across in terms of experiential iman, faith, tawheed, awareness and experiencing Allah consciousness, recognizing the greatness of Allah as an adult, not from a child's understanding that we may have been taught, growing up, as an adult aware of what tawheed is and worshipping of our universal creator, what it actually is, and praising our creator, what it actually is, to be aware of the greatness and the graciousness, to revere the greatness and rejoice the graciousness of our creator. Through awareness and experiencing that we can actually become more aware. And as we become more aware of our Creator, the greatness we revere, the graciousness we rejoice, we actually focus with an exclusive focus on our Creator, a focus that is reserved only for our universal Creator, Almighty Allah. You see, so now, over the years, 250 to 300 Friday lectures or so, I'm just talking about the Friday lectures, there has been a, understanding of, if you remember Allah, Allah remembers you. If you speak about Allah in an audience, He speaks about you in a greater audience. It's a great thing to actually speak about our Creator, of all the things we can speak about in the created world, whether we can speak about how progressive we are in terms of, before we lived in a 1-bedroom, now we live in a 3-bedroom. Before we drove a motorbike, now we drive a sports car. I'm just giving an example. Before we bought clothes from, somewhere that sold cheap, now we're buying designer wear. I'm just saying that's a different kind of progress. And so you can talk about all that, and you can focus on all that. But the focusing on our Creator is a unique focus. And that security that develops as one focuses on the Creator. If you remember Allah, Allah remembers you. Those who fail to remember Allah, the Quran tells us, they will live a depressed life. There's many people with having no money and now they have more money. Not to say there's anything wrong with money, but are living depressed lives. There's many people who lived renting before and now own their own homes. They're still depressed. There's many people who worked for people and now they have their own businesses. They're still depressed. You get what I mean? There's many people who were lonely and now they got married and they got children. They're still lonely and depressed. You know what I mean? So the things of this world, the Quran says you can, the only thing that really matters is bringing to Allah a purified heart. Neither your wealth nor your children is going to avail you. And my point is that we can talk. We can talk about a lot of things. And there's endless topics to talk about. But I've come to realize that our Creator alone is for us to be in awe of, and to be impressed by, to be interested in. The more we can be interested in our Creator, becoming more and more aware of our Creator, the more we can have Allah consciousness, the more we can be muttaqeen, those who are aware of Allah. It changes everything. It changes everything. And the progress that we experience, I can tell you from 2012, and I was called to speak in a mosque. It was the first time. And but I was, before that, like in the psychological field. Not to say that I'm not, but now it's more spiritual psychological field. I got my bachelor's degree in science and my postgraduate degree in psychology in the 90s, mid-90s, around there. And I worked with people as a therapist and counselor with crisis and difficulty. I also worked at the Lifeline and Careline. I also had a employment at a Muslim private school as a school counselor and as a life skills facilitator. I was helping people from a maybe psychological way, and I started teaching people from across South Africa, and I've been teaching across South Africa for over 22 years now. And it was only in 2012 that I started delving into spirituality in its purest form. And I can tell you that that is the solution. I have been able to effect massive shift in me through Allah consciousness. The change in me. I've said it 3 years ago when I started doing, about 4 years ago or so, we started doing the Believers Refuge training, which was a free program conducted in South Africa, in Cape Town, and teaching people in seminars, free seminars once a month. And I said that Allah consciousness is a solution to all problems. The Quran says, if you fail to be aware of Allah, you live a depressed life. Those who are unaware of Allah, they will be insecure. And without the guidance, they will remain insecure. And so I came to realize, not to say I wasn't speaking, on Muslim platforms. I was doing radio from the late 90s, radio stations all across South Africa and some satellite radio stations. I think I've been on every Muslim radio station in South Africa, and I've been on, the satellite radio. I've been on TV. I think almost all of the Muslim TV stations in South Africa, I've been featured on it. I've also been featured on DSTV, issues of faith, Spirit Sunday, SABC. I've been in documentaries on the topic of spirituality. So, what I'm saying to you is that although I've come through working on myself and other people in crisis and difficulties, through this movement and evolution over the years, I've come to realize that the worship of Allah is the ultimate healing. The worship of Allah is the ultimate healing. Not in the way that people do, ceremonially and out of religiosity. Not as in, just tell me what to read and when to read it and how many times to read it. I'm talking about actual taqwa. Iman entering into your heart. The Quran says that don't say you're a believer if Iman has not entered into your heart. You understand? You can only say you're a believer if Iman has entered into your heart. And don't say you're a believer if Iman hasn't entered. If you are a person who's submissive in religion, don't say you're a believer. Say that you are submissive in religion. So there are many people who are just telling me, I don't know, I'm looking for somebody to follow, and somebody just tell me what to do, when to do it, how many times to do it. And for me, that's not really becoming aware of Allah as the authority and turning to Allah. The Quran says that if you turn to Allah, Allah is sufficient for you. Allah is sufficient for those who turn to Him. The Quran tells us that if you believe in Allah, He'll guide your heart. And so I, in 2012, started moving into Allah consciousness. As a young person, I always knew there was value in Islam. Anything that tells you stay away from things that are destructive. A teaching that says don't gamble. You don't need to be somebody who's spiritually evolved to recognize that's really supportive of the individual financially and supportive of the community financially. That is to establishments that take people's money away, especially powerless people away through their consent because they're above the age of 18, so now they are allowed. If it was different, if these institutions said and I'm not condoning and encouraging them, that first, if you enter this, you've got to make sure you're not compulsive or obsessive, Just saying that over 18, we expect you to know what you're doing is not true, because if you look at the people with gambling problems and so on and so forth, creating horror in their lives and creating horror in the lives of their families, and these institutions are not really supporting. So I could see that. You didn't need to be spiritually enlightened to see that. I could see that a religion that says don't do intoxicants, don't actually, alcohol is not good for you. And I could see that. And again, the society will say, okay, if you're above 18 years old, we trust you to make your own decisions, whether you want to drink or not. But how many people are secure enough to actually handle alcohol or gambling? And I think it's overwhelming majority of people that lose power to gambling and addiction and all that sort of thing. And there's no before you walk into the bottle store, we check to see you got a psychological assessment to say that you are secure. No, you're above the age of 18. So I could see, I wasn't smart, spiritually, but I could see that Islam was a teaching that had some benefit for humanity. And like that, usually, you look at people today with credit card debt. Most of the people are into credit card debt, and most people will never get out of that credit card debt, and they'll be there forever. You can see people who are bonded forever for their homes and whatever it is, and will never get out of it in their lifetimes. It doesn't take, superior intelligence to realize that Islam is encouraging people to behave in a way that is beneficial to themselves individually, to themselves as families, and to themselves as communities. You don't need to be brilliant. Anybody with a little bit of rational thinking can see that the Quran says, don't with your own hands destroy yourself. Look, notwithstanding those crackpots out there who know nothing about Allah, who are fanatical in the sense of they are, thinking that they're doing something good by being destructive and playing a destructive role in their own lives and other people's lives. I'm not talking about those people. Every religion has their own fair share of people that are religious addicts. And you get other kinds of addicts we've been talking about. I'm not talking about those people and those people giving Islam a bad name. But those people who are aware. If you look at non-Muslim people, Michael H. Hart was a historian and scientist, and he put the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as number one of the most influential people in history. You understand? Non-Muslim people who use their reason can actually see what the Prophet Muhammad stands for and what his influence on humanity has been and will be. You can see other people, George Bernard Shaw and Thomas Carlyle, and these are people from long ago, and you have people from recent times. You have philosophers, all kinds, and they acknowledge the beautiful way that Islam is. Actually, sometimes more than Muslims, so-called Muslims, submissive in religion, people actually know how beautiful the Prophet, the Quran is, and so on. So I'm just saying that I always knew that this was a teaching that taught respect of self, respect of one's body. Do not with your own hands destroy yourselves. You know what I mean? Hold on to the rope of God. Do not breed division among yourselves. Humanity is one. God is one. Humanity is one. We all one. Bringing people together. If you go to Mecca, you'll see people from all kinds of different places in the world together and in ceremonial, worship. Blacks and whites and talls and shorts and yellows and browns and rounds and thins and all, everybody, people rich, everybody poor, you'll see them all together. You can see anybody who's got a mind and is really not lost can see this is against racism. Well, let me not say it like that. Let me say this is for humanity as one brotherhood. It's guiding people beyond superstition. People have been superstitious. They have these ideas about God. Not to say that some Muslims don't have ideas about God. They don't really are. They're not really aware of God. They have ideas about God. And most people have their ideas and they want other people to follow their ideas. And we're not really worshipping God. So I knew. What I'm saying to you is I knew that there was value in Islam. And so, although I wasn't really into Allah consciousness, I knew that Islam was not some strange crackpot thing. Although when I saw the people, it couldn't it didn't make sense. But I'll explain to you that what this journey has been like for me over all these years, and as I look forward now to the rest of my life in teaching what I want to do. This is an opportunity for all of us to look at where we've come from, where we are, where we're going, what's our priority. We can make dua for what's important for us for the rest of our lives, you know what I mean, and move forward. So I'm just taking this opportunity to tell you about me, tell you, I don't know if it's of any value to you, but I'm just sharing. And then I became aware of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and I realized this man was the most honorable in terms of conduct on the face of the planet that ever lived. There will be no leader that was like him and will be like him. The most honorable human being, from not knowing how to read and write to taking on a place in society, from being a husband and a father and a community supporter and a leader and a military strategist when he was retired. This was amazing. One person that his father passed away when he was, not even born, in his mother's womb. His father passed away, his mother passes away at 6, and he's living with his uncle and all that, and when he's at the age of 40, when he starts getting this information, he starts telling his family, some of his own family turn against him without family support. His own family, some of them tried to hurt him and kill him, you know what I mean, and his own tribe, and yet he remained peaceful and he remained honorable, and people would treat him badly and he would be kind to them, and what a loving, honorable human being he was. I recognized, because when you look around you as a person in South Africa, born in a so-called Muslim home, it's hard to see the beauty of Islam. It's hard to, you do it like don't gamble, it's wrong, right? But you're not aware of why it's not healthy and why it's destructive, and what a great thing it is to have your income to use it for what benefits you and others. And the same thing for alcohol. Imagine if your parents or you and your parents are gambling all your money, or imagine you and your parents drinking alcohol together and celebrating, wasting money, not helping society, the road accidents that occur because of alcohol. At the time of COVID in South Africa, they stopped immediately alcohol sales. Why? If alcohol was so good, why did they stop it? They stopped cigarette sales. Why? If these things are so good, why did they stop it? They shut down the casinos, but they were quick to open them up after that. They got reasons for all that, So this is my point. My point is, when you're growing up in South Africa, you only see the guy with a hat on your head or a beard, and you think, I've got to put a hat on my head and a beard and I'm going to be sitting in the mosque. You don't know awareness and experiencing of the beauty of Islam. Well, that was my experience. Islam is looked at as something you just got to do, and God wants you to do this, and if you don't do this, this is bad and wrong, and you're going to go to hell, and make sure you don't go to hell. Be like everybody, fit in the community, what the people are going to think. You must be like them and look like them and fit in like them, and just find your guru and follow your guru, and we have this guru and they have their gurus, and our gurus are right and their gurus are wrong. You know what I mean? But over the years, I'm telling you what I've become aware. I knew that Islam had value in it. I have more respect for Islam than ever before. You understand? And I knew over time, I came to realize that the Prophet was not like what we see, these people who say they are leaders and how they behave. The Prophet was in good health. He ate well. You understand? He didn't overeat. He wasn't obese. He was active. He was fit. His character, his mannerisms. The sunnah is not just if you grow a beard and you wear a hat and you wear white clothing, that's the sunnah. The sunnah is the characteristics, the mannerisms, the attitudes, the behaviors of the Prophet. You get what I mean? So people just reduce Islam to just don't eat the pig. That's Islam now. Halal and haram. They forget about tayyib. I spent half the year last year talking about that. Those lectures are available on podcast. If anybody wants to, links will be made available that you can go to the podcast and listen to all the lectures from last year. And my point is, when you're growing up and you see these people, you think that's what the Prophet was like. But when you realize what the Prophet was like, and you realize, wow, whoa, Islam was more amazing than anybody told me it was. As an adult, I began to see it. It was awesome, incredible. I stand for Islam, the true, real, society uplifting Islam that Islam really is. Not Islamism, what people have made it into a religion. The Prophet, when I discovered the Prophet, it was awesome. It was like, wow. He wasn't like these people who in madrasa would smack me and treat me badly and I lived in fear of. He loved children. He loved children. When he was praying in mosque, his own grandchildren were leaning on him and leaning off him and holding on to him. You understand? He loved children. He gave them gifts. He smiled. The sunnah was to smile and to be a good, approachable human being. And no matter what he went through, he had a smile on his face and he was approachable. And people treated him badly when he gave them the truth, but he responded with love and respect. And those who were sensible said, hey, this guy is demonstrating real amazing behavior. It's not the behavior that I saw so-called representatives of Islam growing up. When I came to discover the Prophet, it was amazing. It was like, wow, not only is Islam a secret to the Muslims, but the Prophet is the biggest secret to the Muslims. You know what I mean? They don't know what the real sunnah is. They don't know. Even I told you, non-Muslims know more about the amazing nature of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Muslims, when some crackpot somewhere draws a cartoon, they think standing for the Prophet means getting angry when some foolish, stupid man draws a cartoon. Standing for the Prophet means being aware of his honorable nature, means aspiring to live honorably with humility and wearing the pants above the ankle as a sign of humility, not fashion statement. And washing and cleaning as hygiene, using the miswak as hygiene. He was hygienic. What the Prophet was being. Here you have people just looking and acting like the Prophet without actually being like the Prophet. I was confused. And then when I discovered the Prophet, it was awesome. It was amazing. In fact, there was a teacher who introduced me to the Prophet. His name was the late Sheikh Ahmad Didat. He introduced me to the Prophet. He also introduced me to the Quran. He introduced me to the Bible too. And he introduced me to the Quran. I was just told, read it in language. I was so slow in madrasa, they put me in remedial class because I didn't know how to read Arabic. But I can read English, and I can read the translation. In time, I began reading the Quran, and it was an eye-opening experience. It was truly remarkable when I began to realize that the Quran is not just some Arabic, poetry to be listened to and say, wow, mashallah, mashallah, poetry, mashallah, so beautiful poetry. No, the Quran is a book of guidance. So over the years, through these lectures, I have been discovering the beauty of Islam. I have been discovering the beauty of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. I have been discovering the beauty of the Quran and what's its message and its empowering message to humanity. That it's directed to humanity to come together, to go beyond insecurity, to benefit ourselves individually, to benefit ourselves as people in a family, to benefit ourselves in communities, to develop ourselves, humanity, to go beyond ways of being destructive, to be constructive, to find security in our heart. The Quran says, say a'udhu. The Quran says Satan is an enemy avowed. He stands on the path and renders the people kafur and ungrateful, unaware that we are here, and each one of us is to go into a higher level of awareness and to experience peace and to be godly, be peaceful, be loving. You understand? When I became aware of Islam for what it really is, to open my mind. When I became aware of the Prophet for who really he was and what he stands for in the world, opened my mind. When I became aware of the Quran, opened my mind to how the guidance of the Quran is for us as human beings to benefit ourselves and each other and live at a higher level, individually and societally and globally. When I became aware of the Quran, I became aware that Allah created human beings as the highest level of life on this earth, and we are given the power of awareness. We're given the ability to be aware. And Satan doesn't want us to be aware, and we can be aware. The Quran says, go out and look and see and be aware, reason, reflect. Human beings, you can reason. Allah encourages us to reason. He says, those that are not reasoning, they're the lowest of human beings, and they are like cattle, nay worse, because they will not be taking heed. The Quran is encouraging us to human excellence. You understand? Allah created us, caused us to be, continues us. He guides us to Himself in the Quran. That we become aware of who our Creator is and how to relate to our Creator. And what the error is that we are in that's creating problems for us, and how we can go beyond, and we can have God esteem, we can feel good about Allah. He's the merciful and the peaceful. I'll talk about that very briefly shortly. in the few minutes that I have. But I'm talking about the Quran guides us to Allah. It guides us to who we are. We become aware of Allah and His greatness. We become aware of who we are as highest level of life form on earth and what gifts we've been given and what we have here. And the Quran is a healing of the diseases in our hearts. What a wonderful thing. I wasn't aware of the Quran. Just read it in a language. I see in the month of Ramadan, people just read it cover to cover. Even when I say read it, I mean recite it. And they don't understand a word of it. I could have been like them. Allah has guided me. Shukr to Allah. He has guided me to Islam, what it really is. Allah has guided me to the Prophet, who he really was and is and standing for humanity. Allah has guided me to the awareness of the Quran, what it is, and a book of guidance, the healing of the diseases of our heart. And Allah has guided me to humanity and who we are and the challenge that we are here. What is our purpose for being here? What is our purpose for being here on the planet? It tells us what success is in this world through our death and beyond, and how we can be among the successful in this world and the world beyond through being people of the path, the believer's refuge path, human excellence, that we're capable of the highest levels of excellence. We have already been given potentials and possibilities. Allah is with us and for us. And I think the biggest secret of it all, because I thought Islam was a secret to the so-called Muslims. I thought the Prophet Muhammad was the biggest secret to the so-called Muslims, and I thought the Quran was the biggest secret to the so-called Muslims. I thought the truth about humanity, who we are to Allah, and what we are doing here is the biggest secret to the so-called Muslims. And it turns out Allah is the biggest secret to the so-called Muslims, because that's what I discovered. I discovered Allah, Tawheed. What is Tawheed, and how to draw closer to Allah. You get what I mean? So this is the thing. I have come to the point where I am aware of Allah. And the Quran guides us to become aware of Allah. Does it mean you've got to live in fear of Allah? Because that's what most people think. To be aware of Allah is to live in fear. I can tell you that a believer in English means mu'min, it's secure. I can tell you that as I have become aware of Allah and I become more and more aware of Allah, I am more and more secure. I've never felt this secure in my life. The more you draw closer to Allah and you have your relationship with Allah, then the challenge is, who are you having relationships with? Because we have relationships with money, and we have relationships with our business, and we have relationships with our parents and children and our spouses and other people. And those relationships are trances that Satan uses. And I've been guided to worship Allah and what it means to submit to Allah. I've been guided to worship Allah and submit to Allah. What does it mean to submit to Allah? Do people really know what it means to submit? That there really is only Allah, the actual, and Allah's will is alone real. We are created beings in a created world. Are you aware that you are caused to be, and this world is caused to be? I was guided to humility, and I'm guided to humility before my Creator. That I can do nothing to cause myself to be, to cause myself to continue to be, but here I am existing. I have no power of my own. Allah has created me to exist. Allah continues my existence. Allah is the one who created me as a human being and gave me the highest status. All of us have, as human beings, have the highest status on earth. The Quran says we are created privilege. He gave us value. Allah gave us benefits. We didn't have to make Allah make us. Allah made us. We didn't have to make Allah love us and support us. Al-Wadud, Ar-Rauf. We didn't have to make Allah love us and support us. We didn't have to make Allah promote us and privilege us. We didn't have to make Allah care for us and consider us and take care of everything for us. Trillions of processes in my body, trillions of processes on earth, trillions of processes in the universe happening for us to be alive and to live. And to be aware, given a status and standing, supported in our survival, created to live satisfied and successful. Allah created us. Allah has given to humanity. But most of humanity is ungrateful. So the Quran says, but most of humanity is ungrateful. So I have been guided to Allah to recognize my first and only relationship really can exist with the one that caused me to exist. My parents did not give me a heart to beat, eyes to see life. Allah has caused me to live. I'm grateful to my parents, my mother for birthing me. Allah bless her soul in this world and the world beyond, So what I'm saying, and bless my father in the Qabr, in the hereafter as well. Always in his protection. So, I'm saying to you that I am happy with Allah. My first relationship is with Allah. I have to withdraw my attention from all other relationships and put Allah first where Allah really is. There's nobody but Allah. Only Allah alone is real. I've submitted. My relationship is not with Allah like me and Allah. There's only Allah, because of whom I am and because of whom I continue to be. Allah is the real, I am the apparent. Allah is the actual. Allah is eternal, ever-living, everlasting. I'm aware of Allah. He guided me to Him. Shukr to Allah. He guides us closer to Him. Those of us who choose to take one step towards Allah, Hadith Qudsi tells us, He takes 10 steps towards us. So I'm very grateful that I have a relationship with my Creator and that I am aware that Allah is sufficient for me. I don't need anybody or anything. That I am secure with Allah. My security has got nothing to do with anybody or anything. It's got to do with Allah. I'm happy with Allah's caring of me and consideration of me. It doesn't matter if I don't care for me and consider me, or somebody else doesn't care for me and consider me. Allah cares for me and I'm happy with Allah's caring. And I choose to be among those who are aware and never forget to thank Allah. I choose to be among the people who are shakuran, not kafuran. I choose to give to Allah His, praise due to Him for His greatness and His graciousness, for what He has given to me, existence, experiencing as a human being, created us empowered, created us to excel, created us to joyfully express, enjoyably experience in this world through our death and beyond, created us to energize realities that through dua, and He always responds to the believers. Allah's favored us. So I'm happy with Allah. I will remember Allah more and more every day. I will draw closer to more and more. And that is my intention for this year going forward. And this year going forward, that is my theme of guiding people to what I've been guided to sharing to them how to have a shakuran consciousness. That when you shift in your level of awareness and you have a shakuran consciousness rather than a kafuran consciousness. A kafuran consciousness is a denial. A shakuran consciousness is an acknowledgement and an appreciation and the natural good feelings we feel of well-being, that peace in our hearts. The Quran tells us, and I end with this, that in the remembrance of Allah, hearts experience assurance. Other places in the Quran it says Allah put tranquility into the hearts of the believers from which they can expand in faith. And this is what I claim for me in this year going forward. Shukr to Allah who gave me all these years of drawing closer to Him, and I'm positioned at this point. And going forward in this year, I choose to exemplify shakuran consciousness and have not only be a believer but to be a receiver of His every good in this world and the world beyond, and continue to share with you my amazing journey, and may it, if it's of any value to you. Shukr to Allah. All praise, glory and thanks is due to Allah Almighty's choicest blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.